Rite of Passage, the podcast with Giabra Martin.
It's done. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the episode. We are here with author Raymond Foster. How are you, sir?
Excellent. How about yourself?
Very well, thank you. It's Sunday, can't complain. Beautiful weather. Starting to feel a little bit like October. It's been a little weird, but starting to get a little more chill in the air, so that's good. Yeah. Hey, where are you? Where are you based out of? Just out of curiosity.
I live in San Dimas, California, and that's about 30 miles east of Los Angeles,
Okay.
in the eastern part of the San Gabriel Valley. So
Very cool.
the weather here is gorgeous right now,
Yeah.
and it's perfect baseball weather, isn't it?
Yeah, there you go. Is it it's kind of more like sort of desert environment over there? Yeah. A little
Well,
more
we're fortunate we get the onshore breeze in the San Gabriel Valley, so it's more of a Mediterranean climate here.
okay.
Um, so you don't get until you get over the mountains and into the high desert or through the pass into the low desert, you don't get
Yeah.
the extreme heats that you'll get like in Las Vegas or Phoenix
Right.
or something like that.
So I had some family living in Washington State, and they used to live in kind of the Seattle area, and then they moved to middle of the state. And it was kind of like baffling. Like you're going from driving from Seattle to the center of the state, and you go through the mountains, and there's all these tunnels, and it's like a rainforest on the west side, and then you get through on the other side of the mountains, and it's like a desert suddenly. It's like the clouds can't get over the mountains, so like one side is totally tropical, the other side is a desert that has rattlesnakes and sagebrush, and it's like you go through a tunnel and then you like come out of kind of like a time warp. So I kind of wasn't sure. So you're still on the kind of west of the mountains there?
Yes, we're on the wetter side.
Okay,
Not it's still a desert climate, but it's wetter.
very good. So I'm glad you reached out. I kind of haven't been doing as much of the podcast just to focus on other things, but you sent me an email and I was very interested. So you are a Freemason.
I am indeed, yes.
Very cool. How
Yeah.
long have you been a Mason?
So I entered the fraternity about 20 years ago.
Okay.
I met my first Mason, or the man that I knew I was a Mason. I was actually about 15 years old, so that's going
Hmm.
back more than 50 years ago. He would become my father-in-law, and he was the guy who introduced me first to Dianetics and Carlos Castaneda, and then we talked about Plato and Aristotle. And I
Hmm.
got my jump start into philosophy. And I thought that Masons were men who sat around and discussed the great ideas. Turns out I was wrong on that account. But it nevertheless led me on a journey, and ultimately would culminate with me becoming a Master Mason about 20 years ago, and then continuing within the fraternity in various capacities.
So you're a 33rd degree Mason then?
No, I'm a Master Mason. So Masonry is just has 3 degrees, one, two, and three.
Hmm.
What you're referring to is a concordant body, or and it is a Scottish Rite, and it actually has 32 degrees. And
Hmm.
these are actual. Well, it has 32 minus three because you've already had three, so it's actually 29. And
Okay.
you get those degrees, and those the 3 degrees of Masonry are essentially, think of them as morality plays that impart some kind of esoteric information, which we'll
Hmm.
discuss. The only thing that I won't discuss is our modes of recognition. We have secret handshakes and passwords, and I
Hmm.
won't discuss the ritual, the words themselves. But all the symbols and a lot of the ritual is actually open source knowledge, and that's what my book's about. But
Hmm.
anyway, the 33rd degree of Scottish Rite is an honorary title given to a man for his work within Scottish Rite.
Hmm.
Now, there's also another body called the York Rite. I'm a member of the York Rite, and there aren't 32 or 33 degrees in the York Rite. Then the difference is the York Rite, Scottish Rite essentially is its foundations are actually in France. The York Rite, the foundations are sort of in England, but it's really an American Rite.
Hmm.
And one is secular, that is the Scottish Rite, whereas the York Rite, up until pretty recently, was very specifically for Christians. It was a Christian
Hmm.
degree.
Interesting. Yeah, everything I know about Masonry comes from Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, and that's Scottish, right? And then um, Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. And I think those mostly cover really the Scottish Rite. So I don't know nearly as much about like the York. I guess I didn't realize they were secular. I wasn't sure where, because like you hear different things about Masons that like I don't know. People have, all these different ideas from the outside, right? That some say they're a Christian organization, some say it's not even as religious, it's mostly, philosophical, and then some think it's demonic, and you get all kinds of different things. So it's hard to tell from the outside, like what you're really working with.
That's the part of that's the I suppose the downside of the secrecy is
Hmm.
the rumors that swirl around it. Originally, when masonry goes from being operative, that's the guys who work with stones, to the speculative, the men who meet today as Freemasons. And this transition begins probably 450, 500 years ago and culminates in 1717 with the formation of the Grand Lodge of London.
Hmm.
So initially, at the time, the Constitution required that a man be of the religion where he lived. So if you lived in England, you were going to be an Anglican. If you lived in France, you'd be a Catholic. And that
Hmm.
was a requirement. Today, the requirement to be a Freemason is that you have a belief in a supreme being and a belief in an afterlife. In California, I think it's either 14 or 17 religions are recognized. And then if a man makes application and he doesn't, not one of those, then we go to the Grand Master and they get a dispensation. But I sit in lodge with a man who is Jewish. I sit in lodge with a man who is a Muslim, and
Hmm.
then there's many Christians. I sit in lodge with Catholics and Protestants, and
Hmm.
so there's a mix. And I've been present when a Sikh was made a Mason. So
Wow.
it's not a religion, but it requires a belief in a supreme being to be a member.
Yeah, and I mean, it occurs to me that like all of those are in the Judeo-Christian. Like when we're talking about God, we're still talking about the same God. Like I mean, we're debating between Jesus and the prophets and things, but one true God. So then, like, what about? I mean, Hinduism. I guess Buddhism isn't a religion, but where do the other ones still allowed? Like if you have like a pantheon versus like a supreme being.
Well, I will tell you that again. I was present when a Sikh was made a Mason. I know a Buddhist who is a Mason. I know
Hmm.
a man who is a Shinto Taoism. He's a Mason.
Hmm.
So, and then we have Zoroastrians, and there's
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
quite a plethora of people who are Masons. I think, and that's a good question. Um, I think that it would require a belief in a supreme being,
Hmm.
not necessarily a pantheon.
Yeah.
But that's the best way to look at this is that Masonry requires a belief in God, religion requires a belief about God. And
Hmm.
so we don't, there there's lots of what we're interested in personal improvement through a series of we call it a moral science, a philosophical
Hmm.
science. And what we teach, it seems magical, but if you define magic as something we don't quite understand, anything that we don't understand is magic.
Yeah.
I got a cell phone here. I know that it works, but I don't know how it works. It's magic
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Um, but we take it as science. There's a science to living, and we as human beings are exploring it and trying to figure it out. So I
Hmm.
think that's what Masonry provides, a pathway for the exploration of building the temple within. That's the title of my book, The Temple
Hmm.
Within.
Yeah, yeah. So I do want to get into your book. I mean, I could pick your brain endlessly about masonry but I think diving into your book, we probably get into some of the good questions. So tell us about it here.
So, that's my ninth book. No, it's the
Oh,
eighth. The ninth one came out last week. And
okay.
so, when I retired from the police department, I retired 22 years ago on essentially about the same day my first textbook came out. It was published by Prentice Hall. And
Hmm.
so I became a pretty good technical writer. About 5 years ago, I began to really explore developing Masonic education for my lodge. And as a consequence of that, I developed lesson plans. And lesson plans ultimately would become essays. And those
Hmm.
essays then I kind of road tested in a graduate type seminar I held at another lodge.
Hmm.
And, I would go in and I would start with a proposition and we would discuss it for a couple of hours. So
Yeah.
based on that, I began to then organize everything, and those essays became The Temple Within, which is fairly. My wife says it's one of my best writings, so it's good writing.
Nice. That's awesome. No, I'd love to check that out. What what do you feel is the common thread between Masons? Just Because that question's in the back of my mind. Like, if you have all these different people, just going back a second, if you have all these different people within your own lodge, what is the common thread between the Masons, or what brought them there?
Well, I think that there's quite a few commonalities if you go and
Yeah.
if you travel. I was at a faculty conclave in Ohio in probably 15 years ago.
Hmm.
And I was in a big room with all this very, very liberal faculty from throughout the country. And I'm a fairly conservative individual, but I'm going around the room and I'm talking to everybody. And
Yeah.
so there's a guy, as I talk to people, I will give them I will grab their hand, I'll shake their hand. And it's a very subtle thing, but there's a Masonic handshake. And I will do that. You wouldn't know it if you weren't a Mason. And
Yeah.
so I grabbed this guy. This guy, I got to tell you, he was about 6'4". He's African American with very loud colors on and dreadlocks. And I
Hmm.
grabbed his hand. He goes, "You're a brother?" And he was from Brooklyn. And he was a
Yeah.
Mason from Brooklyn. And we
Wow.
became very, very good friends. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so the commonality is that when we go in and you think of our tools, one of the tools is the level, and we talk about men being on the level. So men from all walks of life,
Hmm.
all socioeconomic status coming together, and they're on the level. They are equals in Freemasonry, and so that engenders different kinds of conversations and different kinds of work. All
Hmm.
of the men believe in or have professed to believe in things like truth and morality. And
Hmm.
so you have some shared values in conversations. All of the men are interested in the fraternal aspect. Most of them are interested in the charitable aspects. So you just have a group of men who have very common interests and common value systems. And I think
Hmm.
that's what it is. You meet Masons, that's what you would find.
Yeah.
You would find that in they believe different things, but the foundations are very similar.
Yeah. Okay. So, oh God, I could pick your brain endlessly. I'm gonna have to probably bring you on a couple times here. So, there's one Manly P. Hall book, and I believe it's called "The Secret History of the United States" or "The Secret Destiny of the United States," and he makes a lot of claims in there. One of them is that America was known about before Christopher Columbus came here, and that Christopher Columbus was maybe associated with the Masons, and he might have been wherever I guess you call it the Master Lodge, like wherever the kind of home of Freemasonry was in that era. He was kind of really commissioned by that. But anyway, so one of these things, and we know this for sure, like most of the founding fathers were Freemasons. Um, they definitely, that's probably kind of how they knew each other. They had common set of values. We know that these guys wrote the most extraordinary government document ever created. And it did, even though right from the get-go, maybe we didn't live up to everything, but this promise of all men are created equal. Like we know that, and my generation doesn't understand this. That is a very radical thing to say in that day. You know what I mean? That like all human beings are dignified children of God who deserve a certain level of respect, and they're free by birthright, not by government, giving them that freedom kind of thing. And people don't realize how radical that was. And then right after the American Revolution, you get shortly thereafter the French Revolution and the English Peasants' Revolt, and all of these raise up the dignity of common people around the world. Like, and I think the Masons were largely behind that. And even in like A Tale of Two Cities, like Charles Dickens talks about, I think it's Madame Defarge, who's like one of the revolutionaries. She always keeps a rose in her hat. And there's this kind of low key reference to the Rosicrucians in there. And I have this feeling that some of these societies are behind some of these major changes. Like, some very powerful, influential people who have a common understanding, they're kind of meeting. And the Masons, it feels like they've been involved in a lot of things, and a lot of them very good, and maybe sometimes not as much. And there's not really a question in there, but like, when people think about secret societies, they think about people who maybe want secret knowledge and a hidden advantage over their common man. But then there's this other idea of like, King Solomon in the Bible who like goes to the highest place and prays for wisdom instead of power. And I feel like that's probably more the foundation of masonry is like men like, hey, I can't do this alone. There needs to be a system. There's got to be a system to living well. There's got to be a structure, and maybe we can do this together. Maybe we can pass down this wisdom, and maybe we can prop up the world a little bit behind the scenes. And Any thoughts on all that? I know there was a long ramble there.
Well, there's you got just give you some maybe some foundation to understand Freemasonry, and then you'll see its place. And it's
Sure.
very interesting that you mentioned the rose and the hat. If you think
Yeah.
of it, that's in Masonry we would call that an emblem. That's a combination of really two symbols. And
Mm.
so if you think about it, she's beneath the rose because it's in her hat. So
Oh.
she is sub rosa. She's below the rose. She's got hidden. She's hiding something. So
Mm.
that's what sub rosa. That's what it means. It means clandestine. It means hidden.
Yeah.
So that's this. You've taken two symbols, you combined them into an emblem, which makes a statement. Sub rosa.
Okay.
Um, Freemasonry, if you look at stonemasons, right, there is a
Yeah.
clear, if you trace the history of architecture, there is a clear and pretty straight line all the way through the Collegia in Rome, back to the Phoenicians, clear back to the building of King Solomon's temple. And if you want to trace Moses even further back into the Egyptians, stonemasonry,
Yeah.
pretty, pretty,
Yeah.
pretty, pretty solid history line. I think it's unlikely that stonemasons themselves developed a secret philosophy. I do think this is likely, though. If you think of the stonemasonry, this history, as this giant tree with these huge and deep roots, it's just shooting up into the sky. But then you
Yeah.
take all the philosophies of life from Buddhism to Christianity and Aristotle and the Stoicism, and they're a vine, and this vine has wrapped itself around this tall tree, and
Mm.
now, as we get towards the top of the tree where we live, the vines are indistinguishable from the tree. So,
Mm.
masonry, as it grew, when stonemasons became, because of construction techniques and gunpowder, building castles wasn't a thing anymore, nor really
Right.
cathedral. That guild is gone, and replacing it because its history is so deep. These vines are now supporting it, and so that's all of those philosophies can be found in much of Freemasonry in our ritual. And
Hmm.
it's an effort for us as human beings to understand how we work and our place in the world. If
Yeah.
you go back, I just cut a reel for Facebook called Whispers of the Nation, or the Craft Whispers in the Nation, something
Hmm.
like that. Um, and I just cut it and I can't even remember it. Damn. Well, so nine signers of the Declaration of Independence were definitely Masons.
Yeah.
11 of our presidents have been Masons, and
Hmm.
13 signers of the Constitution, 13 out of 39, one third, were Freemasons.
Yeah.
So it's if you look at the transition in the 17th and 18th century, Freemasonry, there were many, many societies that were forming up in London. There was the Royal Society, there was the Red-Headed Society, there were,
Yeah.
tobacco societies. But these were clubs where men were learning to govern themselves, right? This is where
Right.
the idea of Robert's Rules of Order come up. So these 13 men who do the Constitution, one of their experiences has been in lodge where there's a form of government in lodge, how you conduct business, how you discuss um, difficult issues, but you don't ruin the organization doing it. So
Yeah. You don't shoot each other.
they had these pathways they had figured out. And if you look at certain aspects of the Constitution, like the dual houses, the Senate and the representation and the House, the Congress, that was proposed by a Mason at the congressional Constitutional Convention. George
Hmm.
Washington, who was a Freemason,
Yeah.
was the presiding officer of that Constitutional Convention. Benjamin Franklin, a Freemason, was the senior statesman of that free of that gathering. So
Hmm.
yes, Freemasonry, in so much as the men who had been exposed to the ideals were a part of those experiences, I think that has governed Freemasonry.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think the craft has had an influence on the nation and continues to have an influence on the nation.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you mentioned your generation. There is a generational issue with Freemasonry, but it turns out, and as I travel virtually around the world, um,
Hmm.
men in their 20s and 30s are in search of the same thing that men in their 60s and 70s, like myself, were in search of.
Yeah.
We were just in a different kind of turbulent time,
Right.
one that didn't provide all of the distractions that kept us from joining organizations.
Yeah.
You know, there's a very famous paper that talks about the end of bowling leagues. I can't remember the name of this either, but it's the end of bowling leagues are the death knell of joining societies and clubs
Hmm.
because you have television and then you have
Yeah.
radio. Now you've got you get your iPhone, you've got, you know, your Facebook, and they
Right.
take up tremendous amount of time. I just wrote an article on the use of Facebook. We have a problem. We have a problem in Lodge with men using their cell phones. They're scrolling.
Really.
I watched. We did a second degree a week ago tomorrow, and I watched a man scrolling through his phone while the degree, and I'm just infuriated by that. But
Right.
um,
Right.
that is, and it's not, when they say generational, I'm not pegging this on human beings. I'm talking generational in the circumstances of it, right?
Yeah.
I think if you took your generation and you put them back into pre-World War II and then required them to go beat the Nazis up, they'd rise to the task. I have no doubt in that.
They'd figure.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you're in a different context right now with different challenges. So I think Freemasonry is still here for young people.
Yeah. I worry about my generation. They've been sold a very, very bad story. About, in a big way, like the death of God. I think a lot of this is downstream from Nietzsche's like God is dead and we killed him and there's not enough water in the oceans to wash the blood off. Feels like my generation is a bit nihilistic, bit hopeless, very, very selfish. And I don't even blame most people for that. I mean, like a lot of what we do encourages that. I mean, all these companies trying to sell you a product, they prey on your insecurity. They're trying to like really build up your ego. We're not having nearly as many conversations about the family structure or what it means to be a man. A lot of men don't grow up with fathers now. So it's like I don't even blame a lot of these young people for like the way they feel. But yeah, the phone addiction thing is a big, big problem. Like I've met a lot of hopeless teachers who are like, I can't get through to these kids. I can't keep their attention. I can't get them to do homework. And you know what? Do they keep like throwing themselves at a brick wall or do they just kind of like give up on these kids kind of thing? And I think maybe Freemasonry has something to offer for these young men. I know a lot of young men are coming back to church, which is amazing. I think when we reach the end of ourselves, we realize that like we can't do this without guidance and structure and the ancient wisdom of our forefathers and ancestors and 10 commandments and I don't know, like all this kind of stuff. So I think Freemasonry has something to offer for my generation, but a lot of them don't know about it.
Well, that's another problem that we have is that, and actually, I'm a victim of that problem. You know, my
Mhm.
first Mason I met, I was 15 years old,
Yeah.
and I would wait 25 years. 25 years went by, and more than
Hmm.
25 years, and I was waiting for somebody to ask me to join. And it turns out that we don't do that. We're prohibited from asking. That's part of our
Really?
obligations. We don't ask. Yes, you have to ask us. And so, and that's one of the primary rules. And so one day I had moved in with my father up north to take care of me, came very ill.
Mm.
And it was either somebody moves in with him or he goes to a home. And so my
Yeah.
aunt she was the worthy matron of the Eastern Star. My uncle was a Freemason. My cousins were Freemasons. And my aunt says
Yeah.
one day, she goes, "Would you like to be a Mason?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've been waiting." And she goes, "Well, the boys can't ask you, but I can." and
Yeah.
and so yeah, and so I would fast forward a few years, and I lived across the street from a man who for 30 years. We were both police lieutenants in different organizations. Our
Hmm.
families had grown up at the same time, and I was in his kitchen doing dishes with his wife when
Yeah.
she said, "You know, Brian is waiting for you to ask him to be a Mason." I went, "Oh." So I walked down and say, "Brian, I'm never going to ask you. You got to ask me." He says, "Well, I want to be a Mason." I go, "Done." And so it's a simple rule, but I think that it's a very powerful rule. You see, if I don't ask you, but I live my life in such a way that you want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And finally, you get the courage to ask me. You're already halfway prepared to become a Mason.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that's the reason we have that rule. We want you to be prepared to ask the question and to receive that answer.
Yeah. There's, and I was going to ask you, like, if it is invite only or, because it's considered a secret society, but there is a profound wisdom in that rule because if people are not ready to receive something, they can't. Like, you can teach some of the most profound wisdom. If they don't want it, they're not ready for it. Like, they have to have a buy-in. They have to be, on their horse going down that path. Like, you can't bring it to them. They have to be seeking it out kind of thing. So I think that's actually a very good, probably why the Masons have had such great longevity. Partly is we're not pushing it on people. We're going to try to lead by example, and people who reach the end of themselves and want more, be like, hey, we're available. There's a certain contentness, structure, fraternity, charity, stability, um, that maybe we can help you, build in your own life. So
Both, you mentioned these men, these writers, Albert Pike and
Manly P.
Manly
Hall.
Hall. They both allude to this exactly to what you said. Pike
Hmm.
very directly, and I
Yeah.
will tell you that we teach masonry by degrees because you need to prepare to receive one piece of information before you receive the next.
Right.
Number one, and number two is even though you're given it, it's still hidden in metaphor and in symbol and parable, really fable. And
Hmm.
if you get to a point where you ask and then you actually become and you experience the degrees, many men, and Albert Pike says it's 1 in 10,000 really that go
Hmm.
further, but the other 9,999, you receive the benefit of living by the principal tenets, which are brother love, relief, and truth, but you don't get the real benefit of taming your unconscious. You don't get the real benefit of the significant personal improvement that comes from the deep philosophical understanding of the moral science that Freemasonry teaches. And
Yeah.
so, yes, you get, so you're absolutely right. You can't, and I'll tell you this, once a man learns the secrets of a master mason, and this is something Hall says, and
Hmm.
he's right on. You can't tell anybody what it is because you can't articulate it. It's too personal to you
Mm.
to be articulated, and I can't give it to you. You have to seek and find it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that's why it's worthless to you otherwise. Now,
Right.
my book, I really the idea was that there's all these essays that are written, and in the essays there's three questions for reflection, right? And the
Mm.
idea was that a man or a group of men could sit around, they could read a 1,200 to 1,500, maybe 1,800 word essay, and then
Hmm.
talk about those three questions, and
Mm.
those might guide them to a deeper understanding of the philosophy
Yeah.
because I can't give it to you. You have to find it.
Right. I think about this like, and there's a time and place for all things. Like the Ten Commandments is very clear, and it's good we have that structure, but there's nothing to study. But then you take something like Greek mythology, and they don't tell you any of the morals, but then every generation has the opportunity to look at it and study it and ponder it. And parables are that same way. And like you need both. So it is interesting that like, on the one hand, there's certain things we spell out, and then there's other things that like you really got to put in the work to like mull these over and apply them personally. What would be one of the questions directly from the book? If we'll just throw it out there for us, and maybe it needs context, but any good philosophical question you can think of.
Well, the book itself is divided into five sections. The first is called Before the Gate. We call the entrance to the lodge the West Gate. So a man who is not a Mason would be before the gate. And then
Hmm.
it's the first, second, and third degree where I go through and I talk about those degrees. Some of the stuff that I talk about is, I'll tell this to you in the book. There's an in-depth conversation about the Book of Ruth, and that's because there is a passage in our ritual that refers to the Book of Ruth. And so what
Hmm.
I do then is go and explore the Book of Ruth and some of the lessons that come out of that. Um, there's one of the things that's not in the book, and this is an example. I keep writing these essays because that's just what I do.
I love it.
Um, there's there's one of the passages in the book where we talk about the book of Judges. I think it's Judges 12, where Jephthah kills 42,000 Ephraimites in one day. And there's a
Mm.
battle in the Jordan River. Now, 42,000, 42,000. Now,
Right.
at Antietam, the bloodiest battle of the Civil War, the bloodiest battle in American history, there were 22,000 casualties and only 3,000, a little over 3,000 deaths.
Right.
22,000, 42,000 in one day. So I went and I looked and I used an AI for this, but I said, well, okay, look at world populations and compare this number to all the bloodiest battles in history.
Right.
And you can't really, and of course the machine says, well, we really don't know what the in 1000 BCE what the population was, but we can make a guess based on these factors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it turns out that that figure 42,000 is deeper, is larger than any other single day battle, including Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the
Mm.
firebombing of Dresden and Tokyo, if you look at world population as a percentage of casualties.
Yeah. Like the amount of people, total percentage of human life lost in a day or something.
So that's dramatic, right?
Right.
But what's dramatic is the lesson. The real lesson is dramatic.
Okay.
The battle was between internal tribes. What killed all those people was a dispute inside the organization. And it
Yeah.
was a and what really ultimately got the men killed was it was a minor thing. It was a way a word is pronounced. See, if you think about organizations, they die from the inside. They kill
Right.
themselves. There's no external threat to the United States of America. There's an internal threat, right? And if you look at what the internal threat is about and what everybody's arguing about, most of the time, it's it's inconsequential. Human
Yeah.
beings, we take the littlest thing and make a mountain out of a molehill. And so the
Yeah.
lesson there, that's just a hidden lesson in Freemasonry I'm giving you here.
Mhm.
The hidden lesson in just in referring to this and saying, hey, this is so dramatic. 42,000, that number should jump out at you. And
Right.
it doesn't until you start to think about you shave a layer off and you compare it and you remember 3,000 years ago, whether the battle happened or not. And this is the other thing that I sometimes get in trouble with.
Yeah.
Okay. Just because I say something's mythical doesn't mean it's not true, right?
Right.
What it means is that it means that whatever it is, even if it's factual, it's so important that it's reached mythical proportions. It's a
Mm.
myth. It's in our psyche, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
a myth doesn't have to be true. It can be true, and it's not. And I'm not knocking something to say it's mythical, but 42,000, that should slap you in the face. But we read
Yeah.
right over the passage, man. We just read it over. It's been in the Bible for 500 years, the version we're currently using,
Right.
and we just read over it.
Yeah.
But if you think about that lesson, wow.
Yeah. I got to re-explore the Book of Ruth. That's a very important one to my dad. Comes up sometimes, but and there's some other weird Bible stories that aren't necessarily like Tobit. That's one like I think about a lot for no reason at all is Tobit. But so okay, Jesus and Socrates said a similar thing. You mentioned an idea about like I think they both said that you're basically essentially your soul will only be just defiled from within. Um, and that's a real thing. That it's like it's not about what goes in your mouth; it's about what comes out, or like from the inside, these things get desecrated. And you see that in individuals, then you see that played out in societies, organizations, companies, all kinds of things. Let me ask you this: I've noticed a pattern where if human beings have a common external enemy, like right after 9/11 and like all of America, you saw so many American flags and we're mad at the Middle East, we're mad at Afghanistan, Iraq, we're going after Saddam, whatever we're doing. And every American was a brother and sister, and then the enemy was out there. And then when we don't have an external enemy, we start quarreling within. It's red and blue, it's all this stuff. And I don't really understand why human beings need to quarrel. Like, I understand why we need to internally quarrel to grow, but I don't understand why a human being needs an enemy and a scapegoat for all of their discomforts.
Well, you got a couple of different threads in there.
Yeah.
I used to work overseas a lot, and I would tell my friends from other countries, so they would see all the arguing going on inside the United States, and I
Right.
would say, just remember this. This and this is particular. In this, by the way, The French philosopher, oh, the one that went around there, traveled around and observed democracy 200 years ago. I'll think of his name
Is it
after the
René
interview.
Descartes or something?
He, no, I don't think so.
When you say
He
French philosopher, I always go to René Descartes.
I'll think of him. Descartes was a Freemason, by the way.
Really?
But
I don't know.
yeah, yeah. So he saw this thing, and I warned people about it. You know, if you are outside somebody's house and you look in, and they're arguing, and they're just looks like they're just fighting all the time. If you break their window, they're going to come outside and kick your ass. Okay,
Right.
and
Right.
they're gonna work together to do it,
Yeah, there'll
right?
be a
And
unified front. Yeah.
So that's exactly what happens here is that, we just argue, and then somebody does something and we all come together and we take care of that problem. And that
Yeah.
is, for some reason, we have this unfocused energy that we don't know how to harness. And when we don't harness our energy, it just spins around us and causes conflict. And so you're
Mm.
absolutely right then. Now, I will then, this is something I'm not giving away a secret. This is you talked about Socrates and Christ. One of the things we don't consider, and again, this is something I talk about in the book,
Mhm.
is that the Roman Empire was divided language-wise in two, and the half that included Rome was in Latin, but the half that included the Middle East, they spoke Greek. And
Yeah.
so, if you were a Pharisee or a Sadducee, you were going to be a learned man, you learned Greek. And if you learned Greek, you learned it by reading Greek writers. And the Greek writers were Plato and Socrates and all those
Yep.
guys.
Yeah.
So, all of a sudden, Judaism meets mythical Judaism, mystical Judaism, meets
Mhm.
Greek philosophical and political thought, and Christianity is born out of that. That's
Right.
so the fact that Christ said things that Socrates said does not surprise me, or that they were similar in their thought.
No.
That's a
Yeah.
product of that time. Now, that doesn't minimize anything to do with the spiritual nature of Jesus Christ. That's an explanation of the context of the time. And maybe that's why God picked that time to have that happen so it could happen. I don't
Right.
know. I'm not privy to the supreme architect of the universe's, internal designs.
Yeah.
But just because again, I want to, because sometimes people will just like, oh, no, that's anti-Christian. No, it's not. I'm saying, hey, here's something else to look at. And don't reject these other philosophies. It doesn't mean that they're um, not something we should explore.
Yeah. I God, there's a lot I want to unpack in there. We got about 1 minute and then we'll get kicked out randomly. Before we do, so are all of your books on Amazon? Like I'm looking at the Temple Within, I have that pulled up. Are all of your books on here?
They are, but the best thing to go is go to my website, hitechcj.com, hitechcj.com. It's a leftover from my consulting days, but you can get my leadership book, my more recent book, anything, and it's links to my blogs. That's really
Nice.
becoming writer central for me. So go to
Yeah.
High Tech Criminal Justice. You'll find me there.
Perfect. And I'm going to put your website link in the description. So I encourage everyone listening to this, go check it out. Um, oh God, I'm going to have to bring you back because there's so much I want to unpack. But I recently wrote a Greek mythology and I was looking at the fingerprints of God's plan in history. And it's like you've got Socrates who teaches Plato, who teaches Aristotle, who teaches Alexander the Great, who conquers the Persian Empire, unites the Jewish world with Egyptian world, with the Greek world, carving a path. And then as Greece falls, Rome rises. And it's like you cleared this path for Jesus to like then go into Greece. And, it's, there's like a master fingerprint in history if you're really looking. And I was studying that recently, and it was wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, we are back again. Zoom kicks us out at 40 minutes, and that always happens inevitably. But I still have more I want to talk to Raymond about. So I'm going to ask you two questions about your book. Firstly, what is kind of the goal of the book? 'Cause it sounds like it's very, very helpful. It's not a commitment to join Freemasonry or an advertisement for Freemasonry, but it sounds like philosophical questions that people should read about, gather about, discuss together, and then maybe they'll notice some improvements in their life through that. So tell me, yeah, who is it for?
Well, it was for me. Um, the point of the point of Masonic education I was doing within the lodge was for me to work out ideas on my feet. and then to write them these outlines or find those ideas. And the essays gave me the opportunity to do that. And so over time, the real purpose of the book, I finished that book in January of this year, and it sat
Mhm.
for 6 months because I didn't have a title for it. And so
Interesting.
I had to sit, and it's about 100,000 words. It's 455 pages. I mean, it's a healthy book.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
there's downsides to that for me. For the upside for the reader is there's plenty for you to go with, but for me, the downside are the printing costs and everything else. But at any rate, um, the it I had to work out what I was working on, and
Mm,
so I always say, as a lecturer, as a teacher, as a writer, I get much more out of the process than you do. And the other is I have a writing philosophy, and that is that I bring only 15% of the material to the conversation. You,
mhm.
the reader, bring 85%. You bring
Interesting.
you bring your context, your imagination. And so the first purpose was to work that. The second is, the fraternity is dying, right? It's just dying. I mean, it's
Mm.
if you look at California, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there were 250,000 Masons in the state of 25 million. Today, there are 36,000 Masons in the state of 45 million. And so
Yeah,
if
it's
you
an
look at just,
endangered species.
yeah, proportionally, it's just crazy.
Right.
But, and one of the reasons it's dying is we have failed in our mission to educate Masons why they should participate. And
Mm.
so I have a formula for participation and a formula within the book that I'm really hitting home for. That is, the idea is to promote Freemasonry as an alternative within our oath not to ask people.
Mm.
We have these three pillars. It's a philosophical lesson we give every man. The three pillars are wisdom, strength, and beauty. That's it. They comes right out of King Solomon's temple. Wisdom, strength, and beauty.
Yeah.
Well, and we'll tell you what they mean, but here's the thing, here's what I say. Wisdom is the further pursuit of Masonic education. That is getting wise in your craft.
Hmm.
Strength is finding pathways for participation for the members that aren't just the officer chairs. There's based on the men's strengths, how can they participate? And then finally, beauty is displaying the beauties of Freemasonry to our community through community service and outreach and discussion. And these three
Mm.
pillars build a strong lodge.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so I guess that's the first thing. It's selfish. It was for me. The second thing is I think our fraternity needs help, and I was hoping that maybe I could add a piece to it. And so that was the purpose of the book.
Interesting. Um, so I thought, and it's hard to tell when it comes to these sort of, fraternities and things like when we're talking about the three pillars, is this the three pillars of the lodge or the individuals within the lodge, or these might be great metaphors that they're very universal as within, so without, like, doesn't matter whether you're looking at one person or 100 people or 1 million people, same things hold true kind of deal.
Well, now see the three pillars throughout the lodge and throughout the symbolism, there are almost always three pillars. And so if you talk about it, Ben will tell you, well, no, I only see two. And
Mm.
then if you look here, I only see two. And then
Mm.
I will point out to them, well, you're missing the third one.
And that's
Um,
you.
yeah, you're the third one. But if you stand between the two pillars, and
Right.
I see you. There's three there now, and that's where
Right.
we would put the candidate between the three pillars. And I go, well, I see three now. And in a lodge room, the master of the lodge is symbolically a pillar. So the other two that we use within there, obviously he's the third. I mean, there's clearly the ideas of yin and yang or balance or
Yeah.
balancing your intellect with your emotional, your IQ with your EQ. These are all lessons that are there. Some of them are slapping you in the face, but some of them are very subtle. So the
Yeah.
pillars are a symbol, yes.
Okay, when we talk about alchemy, I know there's a great debate about whether people are actually trying to create gold from base metals or if it's a metaphor for like taking a base human being and then turning them into spiritual gold, philosophical gold. a light in this world kind of thing. Where do you land on that?
Well, alchemy, it's so funny. Um, Alchemy's big at, you know who was really big into studying alchemy was Carl Jung. In
Really?
fact, his study of alchemy and his talk about alchemy is probably what is why he's out of favor with many psychologists. But Jung
Right.
was very much into that. But you see, there were two things going on, I think. Two things can happen at the same time or nearly the same time. The first is that they were developing chemistry. I mean, they were taking metals and they were seeing what dissolved what and what would be soluble and what would happen if you mix this together. And
Right.
yeah, okay, we're looking for to transmute gold. Well, sure. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's lead to gold. But it was the basis of beginning the exploration of chemistry, which is alchemy, chemistry, it's pretty much there.
The
You're
land
going to
of
give it
chem.
to him. Yeah. So the second thing is that like all things, remember, uh, go back 500 years and a man who's sitting in a room who's got the time to mix chemicals and try to figure something out, he's thinking these things through. So he's also attaching metaphor to them. He's probably, many of the Sir Isaac Newton was a member of the Royal Society for the Sciences, but he was also a
Hmm.
Freemason, right?
Yeah.
And but he was also a guy who thought there was a code in the Bible and was spend much of his lifetime trying to crack the Bible code. So, you can get too smart.
Yeah.
And so, maybe these alchemists at the same time were developing this idea that it was a really good metaphor too. And
Hmm.
then lastly, I did a podcast, and I like it. I'm on the world tour of podcasts. I've been in the
There you go.
UK, the Netherlands, Australia. I don't know, where are
Cool.
you podcasting from?
Nashville, Tennessee.
There you go, Tennessee. I've done
Yeah.
Ohio, New York. So all around the world, I spoke to some witches in the Netherlands. They're pagans,
Okay.
but they turned out to be witches.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we had a great conversation. It went way over for them. And the thing we talked about was magic, right? Because they're
Okay.
they're into they're into white magic. And I'm like, well, first off, and we talked about, magic is anything we don't know. And
Right.
if there are rules in the universe, right? And there are psychological, there are spiritual, there are physical rules. And
Hmm.
you talked about as above, you'd said this, as above, so below. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the basic Masonic symbol, man. You have the square and the compass like this. That's what it's
Right.
saying. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
pointing
Yeah.
out to you. Manly Hall will tell you, he'd give you that one. Um,
Yeah.
so alchemy is also a way for us to explore the idea um, that we can control more than we think we can.
Yeah.
One of my earlier podcasts, I talked about, you've heard The Secret and manifesting things, and okay, so I think that's all bullshit. I don't think you can manifest things, but I do think I know this for certain because I do this
Hmm.
all the time. I do this thing. I do it all the time. You see, your conscious mind right now, buddy, is trying to make sense of the world so you don't get eaten, you don't get stepped on, you don't get run over. It's
Yeah.
trying to keep you from getting killed. It's busy and it only
Hmm.
sees that. But you have this other thing called a subconscious. And that subconscious is on the lookout for what you really, really want in life.
Hmm.
And this to me explains why you probably know people who go from one bad relationship to another. Well, it's because
Yeah.
that's
Or
what they want. That's what they really want. That they're seeking that out subconsciously. And I'll
it's
tell
not what they want as much as what they believe they deserve and is appropriate for them.
that's what they want. That's what
Yeah.
you want. You've created that track in your subconscious. And there's a way to overwrite those tracks that Freemasonry teaches men.
Hmm.
And again, we use a biblical passage to express this.
Hmm.
I think it's Matthew 22, asking you shall receive, seeking you shall find, knocking it shall be open unto you. We
Yeah.
speak before we think. Nobody ever says, I wish I had said that before I thought it, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and this is another valuable thing about speaking on your feet is you speak first, right? You got to formulate your thoughts later. Um,
Hmm.
so if you say something and then you think about it and then you take a concrete action, no matter what it is. That's why they tell you to write down your goals. That's a concrete action. If
Hmm.
you do this, and I will guarantee this will be magic. If you do that, if you say something that you want to do, and then you think about it, and then you take some small action, doesn't matter how small it is. And you do that
Hmm.
3 times. Do it 3 times. And if you do that 3 times, what'll happen is you'll create a groove in your subconscious, and it'll look for, we call it gut instinct, synchronicity. It'll
Yeah.
look for the opportunities that you're not seeing. You
Mm.
are blind. You don't have eyes to see. All of this should ring true because you've heard it all before. And that's because we're not using our subconscious. You say that you said and began this, you're glad I reached out to you. Hey, that was a conscious effort. My subconscious was working on that part. That's why I did that. And I
Yeah.
don't think there's no randomness to any of this.
No, no. I'll tell you what's very much not random about your timing. So I just launched a meditation and hypnosis business. This is something I was working on just before you logged on. So basically, what people are going to do is they're going to come to my website and they're going to take a survey. They're going to choose between four narrators, three ambient sounds. It's like I have a gentle woman, a confident woman, a wise grandfather, kind of a businessman, rain sounds, ocean sounds, forest sounds. They're going to tell me their goals and struggles, and I'm going to make them a custom hypnosis track to try to reprogram the unconscious mind towards success. And I have noticed for myself very clearly when I am in a relaxed flow state, I have never come up with a single idea in my life, but great ideas come to me randomly when I am happy, when I'm quiet, when I'm enjoying just being a father, a husband, enjoying a summer day. You're driving, you're in the shower. Brilliant ideas come to you when you're in a completely relaxed state. And then when you're on your high horse, like your wife's building you up, whatever it may be, you're like, I could actually turn that idea into something. And there's these two parts. There's like, I'm calm enough for ideas to come to me like a radio. And then I have enough faith in myself and in God to think that I could do something with that idea. And so many people have bad programming that like holds them back. Either the ideas don't come or they think I could never do something with that idea. And I think I can help people with that. And it's funny we're talking about all this stuff and your timing. So I don't think there's any coincidence. And I don't know if it's manifestation. Like the idea that I could manifest a duffel bag full of money on my porch is bullshit. But there is a manifestation thing where like you can become the person who can receive the gifts that you want in life and wield them correctly. And I use this analogy of like if someone gave me a brand new car today, it'd be an amazing gift. I can travel to work, I can have this freedom, I can take my family where they need to go. But if you give that same gift to a 5-year old and you curse them, and it's like so much of life is becoming the people who can receive these things and not be destroyed by them, kind of thing. So, um, anyway,
You just restated what I said exactly.
in a lot of
But
ways,
remember, but remember this. When you
yeah,
said, I think ideas are bullshit. I do.
or
Because,
manifestation. Yeah.
yeah, but and I'll tell you why. When you get a great idea, right?
Hmm.
That's the knocking part. That's the knocking, right? That's your subconscious is knocking. But if you don't open the door, if you don't take the action to bring it into fruition, that's where
Right.
everyone falls down is you don't open the door. Brilliant ideas are everywhere. See, I'm glad you're working on your website because you're taking action. And
Right.
so the more you do that, the deeper the groove becomes in your subconscious. And again, all of this is around you already, and you're just now able to see it. It's clearing the fog from you. It's
Yeah.
already here. It's all around us. The opportunity, and we call that gut instinct. We call that synchronicity. We have words for this,
Right.
um, but this is how it's done. And Freemasonry teaches this, by the way, and it teaches
Mm.
it in a very powerful way over and over again through a thing we call perspectival and
Mm.
participatory knowing. And
Mm.
you can only do it. This is the key. I could tell you this is the other thing. You could read this temple within and take all the stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you don't perform the ritual, that's why I'm not giving anything away. If you're
Right.
not performing the ritual, then you're not going to uh, get the advantage. You have to perform. You have to participate in the science to benefit from it. I guess that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
It's not free or yeah. It's participatory. Like
Yeah.
I can show you the door, but you have to walk through it, as you know the
That's
old
right.
saying goes. Do you know this idea of simultaneous invention?
Well, I know what the two words together mean.
Well, there's this. It's a for sure. There's a weird phenomenon in history where people seem to invent the same thing at the same time in
Sure.
totally different places, and it's like, and there's a bunch of examples like trains and radios and all kinds of stuff that like two people who never spoke. And there's this idea that like maybe the ideas come to us like we're more like radio receivers than the brains that generate ideas kind of thing. And obviously there's a context, like you can't make a radio until all these other pieces have been figured out. You can't make a train until these different components have already been figured out, the metallurgy, steam propulsion, whatever it may be. But it is weird that it's like the ideas are all around us, and the key is getting into a place where like you can tune in, and it's almost like getting yourself quiet enough to hear, um, and getting out of your own way so that ideas kind of flow to you, and then taking what a lot of people call inspired action, which is not just doing arbitrary things, not just putting your energy into scrolling through your phone. It's like taking a focused, very strategic approach to whatever, and bringing in a faith component, and just duty, discipline, all this kind of stuff.
Well, I think that you're touching a basic operating philosophy that I have, and
Hmm.
this is probably flows through the book in some way because it's part of me. I
Yeah.
don't believe that human beings create anything. I think that everything has been created,
Hmm.
and we discover. And
Hmm.
so, at the building of King Solomon's temple, everything existed to create an iPhone. Everything. All the
Right.
materials were present. The theory wasn't created, it was present. It was
Hmm.
just as you said, the structure, the context, the historical structure wasn't built first. So the fact that society gets to a place where there is a common structure, and then men
Hmm.
look around and they say, "Oh, well, look, we can do farming this way. We could build a internal combustion machine. We could have radio waves." Yeah, of course. I mean, we get to a certain level, and we all can see, and now we take advantage of those discoveries, and we certainly stand on the shoulders of all those people before us.
Oh yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't think I don't, that's not magic. I mean,
Right.
that's common sense. So I think the outlier is the human being who can who can be a few days ahead of everybody else in their
Right. I
thinking.
mean, yeah, yeah. The
Just
first to
just
receive the idea.
just over the horizon, right? Just
Right.
over the
Too far.
horizon.
What's that
Yeah.
saying? If you're one step ahead, they call you a genius. If you're two steps ahead, they call you crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I've always wondered this, and I'm not sure if you can reveal the secret. Why a checkerboard floor in the lodges?
Sure, it teaches, well, there's so many lessons that it teaches. Again, it's a symbol, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the first is that the first surface level we teach a man is that as you walk through life, you're going to make decisions, and you should always try to make the right one. And so the right is the white, and the wrong are the black, right? But then
Left
if you
hand.
think about it, yeah, if you think about it though, right? Um, think about light and dark as chaos. And think about
Okay.
walking around on that checkerboard square. You can't walk around and not step on black and white, right?
Right.
That means that as you go through life, and by the way, the checkerboard square is always surrounded by what we call a trussellation, which is like a golden border. And they'll tell you that you're surrounded by that's God surrounding you. Well,
Yeah.
I will tell you that's the rules of the universe are surrounding you. And so you're making decisions within the confines of rules that exist. And the more you know about the rules, the better your decisions will be made. But I
Yeah.
also tell you that as you step in chaos, right? It doesn't matter. You have an illness, somebody gets ill, you're in an accident, something bad happens at work. As long as you have another foot firmly in the light, which is your character and your values, and the
Hmm.
deeper your character and values are, the more chaos you'll be able to withstand. And
Hmm.
chaos is important because creativity only comes out of chaos.
Right. It's the infinite potential that has not been actualized, but
That's right. So the better your value system is, the stronger your character is, the more you can step in as much chaos, much creativity, and you can be the master of that chaos.
Yeah.
So there's all these, again, we walk around that floor all the time, exploring that as a metaphor. And some men never get it, but
Yeah.
I think subconsciously it's constantly working on them.
Let me ask you, the gold border, could that also symbolize like God's protection? I'll give you an example. I'm a young father. I mean, I'm not personally young, but I have a toddler. And I swear he wants to run headfirst into everything. And it is only through the grace of God that he is safe. Like, I can't keep him safe. He can't keep himself safe. And it's almost like he is running on the checkerboard, but thank God there is this golden border that is controlling the limits of the chaos.
Well, I have five children,
Yeah.
and the oldest is almost 50. So, my oldest grandson's 28, and I got a grandson that's two. I got a grandson that's two, and he's the same way, man. He's running right into danger all the time. I saw him the other day looking behind him as he's running, and he ran right into something.
Just
Um,
turning, giving me gray hairs, man, every day.
yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're pretty durable as human beings. That's what you should teach you.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
you know, this is a question I think you have to answer for yourself. Do you have a guardian angel? Does it feel like you have a guardian angel? And if it does, then you probably do.
Yeah.
I don't, there's no reason I can't believe that. Why not?
Right.
Why not that there's protection around us? I do know though that I think with everything else, it's what you accept and what you use. I mean, if you have
Right.
a guardian angel and you'd ignore it, yeah, I guess that would be bad.
Yeah, it's one. Yeah. Having wisdom and using your wisdom or whatever it may be, whatever gifts it is,
And by the
having it
way,
and using it are not the same thing.
the most important part of that conversation was the fact that you brought something else to the golden border that I don't have. And that's the important part of Freemasonry is
Mm.
to continue to see how these symbols speak to us personally.
Yeah.
Uh, and see that's a lesson you could teach other men. And you've got a great physical, ask the question, is this what's going on? That leads to me, my way of thinking, that leads to positive, deeper thought. And that goes back to your creativity, the grooves and the tracks in your mind, et cetera, et cetera.
But yeah, like you could bring a question like that to the lodge and then have good discussion. And maybe it'll deepen everyone's understanding and contemplation. And so I don't, that sounds like a good. I think the Masons are probably pretty misunderstood. Let me ask you, who would benefit the most from the temple within?
The person who reads it.
There you go. There you go.
So I had he's a brother at the lodge, and he's a
Yeah.
friend, and a friend and a brother are two different things, by the way.
Hmm.
And so he says, "Hey, I'm really busy right now. He's the senior ward. He's gonna be the master next year."
Yeah.
He goes, "I'm gonna read it next year." And I said, "Derek, I don't give a shit if you read it, but it'd be nice if you bought a copy, right?"
Here's the commission, man,
Yeah,
something.
yeah, that's to me, all right. What does count for me? Well, for me, it's people buying copies, whether they read it or not.
Hmm.
I think that personally, I wrote the book for you. I wrote it for men like you who are seeking, um, uh, they're seeking permission to explore the universe in an esoteric fashion. They're
Hmm.
seeking, they're looking for hidden information. They're looking for the occult. They want permission to expand their own horizons philosophically as part
Yeah.
of what it is to be a man. And that's what I'm hoping the book does.
Yeah. I go back and forth. Like I love all kinds of like I love esoteric books, but then I also there's a very famous exorcist in Nashville, brother Dan Fryer, I think is his name. But he's, and as a priest, his advice is like, don't play with any of this. Like, don't play with Ouija boards. Don't play with, opening your third eye. Don't play with Reiki. Like, there's all kinds of things that are like off limits, and you're opening the door to inviting bad things into your life that you don't understand. And I think there is a world within the world we can't see. And well, I probably think too much, but there's this interesting thing like in vampire stories, right? Vampire always needs permission to come into the house. And I do think this whole idea of like you cannot be defiled from the outside, it's like you control the door in your own life between the things that come in and come out. And I think people can inadvertently, accidentally invite the wrong things into their world. And I mean, people do that all the time, spiritually, physically. First time you try a cigarette, right? Like, I just opened the door to this addiction into my life. First time you have a drink, whatever it may be. But I don't know if people totally understand what they're playing with at any given moment. So I go back and forth on the occult. Like, I want secret knowledge, but like there's a certain price I won't pay for it. And I don't know the true cost. You know what I mean?
Well, if the word occult means hidden, and that's what I think it means,
Right.
then I'm okay with it. And esoteric, pretty much the same. Esoteric as
Yeah.
opposed to exoteric, plain as
Mhm.
opposed to hidden. I don't have a negative connotation on the word occult. I will tell you this, because
Mhm.
people ask me, Masons ask me, how do I get a deeper understanding of philosophy? Well, I tell them, okay, your starting point is to memorize the ritual. The second thing is to then read the Bible. And I do that because most of them are Christian and
Mhm.
it's a safe place for them to explore.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, I love Carlos Castanedas, and he was a UCLA researcher who wrote on the shamans in Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's one of my favorite authors because some of
Nice.
his stuff is great, right?
Right.
His whole book on petty tyrants was life changing to me. But I wouldn't recommend it to anybody because, well, I mean, you're taking drugs and you're transmuting yourself into an animal, and
Right.
it's deep in metaphor and analogy, and if you take it at face value, you're going to go down a really strange path.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I agree with you. And that's why I think mastery is taught by degrees, is that you have to be prepared to receive knowledge and to explore knowledge. And you have to do it in a safe space because there is dangerous knowledge.
Right.
And so I don't know that it's, I don't know that we need demons. See,
Yeah.
I don't know that a demon would make Adolf Hitler any worse than he was already. I don't know that
Right.
Jeffrey Dahmer, we want to, Mars is the god of war, right?
Yeah. Aries, Mars. Yeah.
Sure, and then Cupid was, shoot you with your arrow. To the ancient man, they would see some average normal person get angry and go berserk, and they would say he's possessed by the god of war. Well,
Yeah.
we know that he wasn't. We know that he was, probably had some hormones running through his system, gave him rage, and the next thing you know, maybe, he went off. There's things they didn't understand, and so I don't know that we need demons. I'm not. I just don't know that we need them.
No. And okay. So I go back and forth on this. Like, the whole idea of demons and hell, like, hell feels unnecessary to me unless it has, like, the only way I can contemplate hell is two scenarios. One is you receive the privilege to live in the world that you were trying to build in your life, like a world without God, where you're the master, where you can have all the things you want and like let your freak flag fly, and there's no rules and boundaries. You can have as much of all your vices as you ever wanted to be separated from God, and you get to live in that. That's one scenario for hell. Another scenario is maybe like a re-education, that like these people aren't hopeless, but they got to live in their ways until they abandon them, and have the humility to like crawl on their stomach like a serpent and ask for God's help. But the idea that like, oh, you live a finite amount of years where you never really speak to God, and you have all these different people and opinions and all these different things trying to lead you astray, and you don't know what's true, and then you are judged for eternity based on whatever limited decisions you made in your limited life, doesn't feel like the loving God that cared enough to make this world and make my son and make my wife and all these wonderful people I get to share this beautiful existence with. So like the whole thing of hell and demons like doesn't actually make sense to me, but at the same time, there was that Minnesota shooter a month ago, right? That gentleman who shot up the mass. Um, Trans individual. I'm not exactly sure how to refer to this person, but I noticed in one of the videos, the manifestos, this person was drawing upside down crosses on all their weapons. And then these notebooks and manifestos were revealed, and this person drew a picture of themselves looking in the mirror, and what they saw back was a demon. And there was this like conversation, like, let me go. And it's like, I won't. And it's like, kill yourself. And it was like, what this person is seeing in the mirror is like this horrible demonic thing. And then it's like telling it telling this person to kill themselves, and then they go draw a bunch of upside down crosses and then shoot at a church. And I'm like, I don't want to mistakenly just say that demons aren't real just because I have not personally seen one. Like, there is weird evil in the world. I know there's obsession. Like, I've even felt in myself that, like, you open the door a little bit to a sin and then the floodgates open or something. It's like you do invite things into your life that you don't understand. And maybe it's the subconscious mind, like whatever it may be, but there are forces um, of good and evil clearly kind of pushing people, is what I'm saying. Like we're on some kind of a chessboard, and I don't know if we're always making decisions the way that we believe we are. As much as maybe you're a pawn in someone else's game or something else's game or something. I don't know.
I can't there's no way to dispute it that I can say that I think that you here's what I know for certain.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you what I know for certain.
Right.
Is that when I was being carried by my mother in vitro, right?
Hmm.
And I was inside of her. I was pretty warm and comfortable, and it's probably a great place to be. And I didn't want,
Yeah.
and we didn't want to come out. And I couldn't imagine this world at all. There's
Mhm.
just no way.
Right.
I can't imagine the next. I don't know what it is. I don't have the you could tell me what it looks like, but I think that's your point of view. There's no way
Yeah.
we can know what happens when we are transmuted or transferred or go on to the next realm. We don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But all the things that you said, as far as, yeah, if you expose yourself to things negatively over and over again, you're creating grooves in your subconscious, and you're going to find the negative things in your life, right?
Yeah.
Over and over. And yeah, the son of Sam said his dog was telling him what to do, and the Mansons were doing crazy shit. And
Yeah.
and this is all of a way for us to try to make sense out of it because sometimes people just do stuff we don't understand,
Yeah.
and we try to make sense out of it so that we can avoid it.
We
I
try
don't
to apply
know.
logic and reason to unreasonable things. Yeah.
I remember a very young policeman. I was brand new policeman, and I got a call to the hospital, and the doctor said, "This is the day my world changed." I remember this. He said to me,
Yeah.
he says, "We have a 9-month-old infant in the emergency room here, and this infant has gonorrhea." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, I don't know. What do you do for that?" And he goes, "Well, the father has gonorrhea also." And I said, "Yeah, okay. So how is this medical issue a police issue?" And he said, "The father and the baby have gonorrhea." And I said, "I don't understand."
I'm not understanding. Yeah. Yeah.
You
And then
see,
explain.
suddenly, he has to explain to me that the father has had sex with his own 9-month-old infant daughter. And that's so far outside of my world that
Right.
it's incomprehensible to me.
Yeah.
But it happened. And so my worldview shifted to how evil people can be. I don't know that they need to be,
Possessed or
being
something.
possessed. That's just a bad person. And so we can't conceive of these things, so we put labels on them sometimes.
Hmm.
And I just so we can make sense of the world around us. And I think you're right. If you play with the Ouija board and you read demonic literature, you're going to create a track in your mind, and the track is going to create more of that energy around you, and bad shit's going to happen. That doesn't surprise me. I think
Yeah.
if you walk in the light and you found yourself in good character and value systems, and you explore the chaos as a creative space, I
Yeah.
think you're going to be amazed at what your life will be like.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I'm not. I don't know.
I don't
There
know.
might
There
be
is
demons.
there is pure evil in the world, and there's no, like, a person like that, like you're describing. There's nothing in nature. Like it goes against literally every natural law, right? Like there's no explanation for why pure evil like that should be in the genome at all. Like, and sometimes you get into realms like that where you're like, is there something more than just some people have a really bad wiring? Like the brain is just wired the wrong way. But I don't know. I mean, I think there is evil, and it isn't easy to just explain with psychology per se, right? Like something like that is, I don't know. I guess I'm open minded to all things are possible, but I can't say by any means that like you're incorrect. Like it is for sure true. Whatever grooves you're continuing to put sandpaper on, the things that you're repeating to do, you're paving a stronger road to do that again in the future. Like I'm adding more lanes, I'm making it smoother, I'm making it easier to keep doing the wrong thing. And people do get in these cycles of, you have a beer day and then it's five and then it's 10. And people cycle all kinds of different directions with these grooves. So I do think, at the end of the day, people need structure, community, fraternity. Men need to be
Sure.
men. They need to be around other constructive men. I do think a lot of us, in many ways, we're the product of the five people we spend the most time with. And maybe that's one of the big value propositions of the Masons is like, if you're a guy who's really trying, you're trying to be a good father, good husband, good worker, constructive member of society, here's a place where you can theoretically be around other men who want the same thing and you all can influence each other to actualize the best possible versions of yourselves. Maybe that's the real value proposition, you know.
I think of evil um, in this respect because there
Yeah.
is evil. There is evil, but
Right.
there's the big but. There's a big qualifier here. You know, the volcano, a hurricane. I remember when I was probably 11 or 12. There was a tsunami in Bangladesh. It killed 50,000 people.
Wow.
That sounds pretty evil to me, man. Just to wipe out
Evil effects
50,000
for
people.
sure. Right.
But here's the thing is that in this world that gives us unlimited choice, the more choice we have, it doesn't, there's no limiters on you can't be a school shooter. We're not going to give you that choice. Oh, you can't
Yeah.
be
Like,
this. You can't be a heroin addict. That's not a choice. I just think that there's such a spectrum of human behavior. It's such a rich context that we live in, and we do,
yeah.
in many respects, have the decisions to make choices. Some people make choices that are incredibly evil
Yeah.
in the way they're like a volcano. But they're a necessary part. Well, the outcome is necessary to a the structure of the universe that allows all the good, I guess.
Yeah. Like, yeah. Because I mean, if you think of like white as order and the black as chaos or left hand and right hand, it's like if things are always in order, there's nowhere to go. There's no moves to make. And you need an introduction to that chaos to then, let's say free up possibilities for history to move forward. Or I don't know, like it feels like there's no way around having these two sides of the coin or,
Yeah.
the yin and yang. And they're built within people too. And it's part of what drives us forward, right? Like if you were perfect, then you would be Jesus and your story would have ended 2,000 years ago and you wouldn't be here. Um, anyway, we're going to get kicked out in less than a minute again. We spoke longer than I was expecting, but this was cool. I don't get to talk about this enough. So I really do appreciate it, Raymond.
Well, have me back some. Get these up there and have me back sometime. We'll talk about something else.
Oh, I love it. Open invite. So anytime, but I'll probably reach out to you coming up here, but hit me up anytime and standing offer, come back on whenever. So